Hi crafters, how's it going? I don't know if this will be a tutorial or a vlog or whatever, but I found out some devastating news from my mother. So, my Halloween quilt, I think I made a video about it. It turns out that the pillowcase for that quilt was destroyed and lost in the move, and I'm kind of annoyed about it. But it happens. And instead of moping around on it, I'm gonna make another pillowcase for it, and then I can have a pillow on my couch to go with the blanket that's currently on my couch downstairs. I also dragged out all the scraps of fabric that I have from that quilt because I still have a fair amount. I have more orange fabric in with another project that I'm using the orange fabric in, so hopefully I don't need to get into that, but if I do, it's fine. Because I'm making one pillow, why not make two more? I've also got the scraps from my Hunter Star quilt, which is somewhere on the screen, and from the quilt that I made for my boyfriend that I haven't finished making technically. But we have a few struggles with this. I'm still moving. I haven't completely unpacked my room and sorted everything yet, as you might be able to tell. Other things, I don't have an ironing board. I have an iron, I don't have an ironing board. I have the skeleton of an ironing board at Mum and Dad's, where I also can't go at the moment because I've been sick and Mum just had a procedure done today, therefore we couldn't get her sick before the procedure, and I don't really want to get her sick after it because she's about to be in pain from her back and she doesn't need that. So I do have these, and what are these, you might ask? I think it's pretty obvious. They're things for the oven that Mum made me. And I have ones downstairs too, but they're shaped like hearts. These aren't insulated properly, but they do the job. So if I just have small things to iron, these on top of a mat. All else fails, I might go downstairs and get the quilt, or my other quilt that's on my bed, and fold that a few times and iron on that, or a towel, but I iron this flat on that, so hopefully that will work. I also don't have any good cutting mats. The good cutting mats were Mum's, so I have to buy my own cutting mats, and so far I've been busy setting up my house and moving, so I haven't done that. I have the shittiest of all our cutting boards. There is another one of this that is at Mum and Dad's for some reason, which is also mine, but it's nicer than, it doesn't have whatever art projects I've done on it, but the backside's fine, and I have a couple of little ones. I do have a number of rulers, like my favorite ruler, and a roller, or whatever the cutty thingy is. I have some needles and a lot of needles. I need to buy more pins, even pins. That's what I meant, pins. I need to buy more of those. I have a sewing machine, and thankfully I have all the Razant cotton that I needed for these 3 projects because I went through the Razant and I stole some. But also, I want to quilt my Hunter Star, which is currently in this box, so I had the thread for that. I need to finish my boyfriend's quilt, so I had the thread for that, and the one that I used on my Halloween one was just a standard one that pretty much goes with everything, and I stole a bundle of that. I think I'm going to show you the table, and I'm just going to get to work on trying to piece this together and do a voiceover so that I can listen to music. I know, so great. Hopefully by this time I've gotten my aprons up. If I haven't, there are 2 videos coming of me making an apron for Mum and I, and it was going all great, and then we all had to move, so I didn't finish it. And then I got sick, so I didn't finish it because I couldn't talk, and I still probably shouldn't be talking as much as I am, but I have my voice back pretty much. But yeah, let's get this started and try to make, I want to start on the Halloween one first, seeing as I have that quilt out. Hunter Star would be next, and then Josh's quilt. And welcome to the voiceover part of this video. Here you can see me sorting the scraps that I had left over from the quilt. When I actually quilted it, I just sorted into my box of cabbage, and then later on I went through and got them out, as well as a couple of other quilts worth, just in case I needed them, and this pillow was a great example of me needing it. Right now I am just checking these original squares from the original quilt that were rejected against what pattern I want to use. I was just trying to recreate the actual square from my memory, and I'm just going through and ironing everything. This video is a perfect example of why you need to invest in sewing space and why I did not sew for the 6 months that I lived at my last place. This is pretty much most of the sewing I did. I tried to make a couple of skirts. Every time I tried to sew, it was more of a hassle than it was worth. I'm just looking up at the actual pattern here, and then remember that wait, I have the quilt. I can just check the measurements on that, and that helped immensely. I'm just truing up the actual squares because anyone that has quilted knows that just because you sew squares together doesn't mean that it's going to be a square or the square that you want. Here I'm just doing rough cutouts, making sure that I have the right size for everything. When it came to the ghost and the orange bits, I cut them down to 1.5 inches so that they were 1 inch once they were sewn onto the actual pillow. And the way I go about this is pretty much the way I laid it out there when it comes to sewing it on, is that I make sure one side is true to the edge and the other's hanging over, so that when I sew on the next bit, I can go to the edge of that bit I just sewed on and it sorts itself out really. And here, the thing that I realised isn't very clear is I'm actually lining up those black Happy Halloweens on this strip and the white Happy Halloweens on the other one, so that once it comes to putting them on the pillow, you see Happy Halloween in the centre. I did this with the rest of the quilt as well. I'd choose a word on a strip and decide that was the word that I was going to follow and the word that you were going to read. And has it been worth it? Totally. And here you can just see a very bad angle of me sewing this on. Not only did I not have my proper camera for this, but I was trying to work out how to set up shots in this room, and this room was not set up for shooting things. It was just the biggest pain that I have ever dealt with when it comes to shooting videos. Here I'm just ironing it. You kind of see the ways that I give up on ironing throughout this entire video, where I at one point iron on the mat because I get over this crappy mat and lifting everything up and down. Most of the time I'm using the quilts, but it was just a pain. For here I'm sewing on the word where I want it and then cutting everything down, making sure both edges are the same as the rest of the square so that I can sew on the longer strip after. I do this with the larger orange bits later on as well, just to make it easier so there's less joins, and it was pretty similar to how I did the actual quilt. I had short bits going vertically and horizontally with long strips of that word fabric that I took way too much time to piece together so they mirrored up. Here I'm just attempting to chop the sides with that ruler and then deciding I like this ruler more for the guides. I have a larger version of this ruler now and I have never been happier in my life to have a ruler. I just love this range of rulers. I don't know why. I decided that I didn't like the size of the pillow and I wanted it to be bigger, so I cut out 3-inch wide strips of the orange fabric, just using my scraps and pieces because I didn't want to cut into the large amount of orange fabric that I had, and considering I had so many scraps of orange fabric from the backing, why not use it all? What glaze do you guys use? Cabbage. This is the first time I made a pillow out of it properly, but I think I'm going to do that more often with all of my projects. I'm not sure if I'll give them away as part of them for the ones that are presents, or if I'll just keep them so they have a pillow from every quilt that I make, and then in 10 years I will have too many pillows or not enough. Oh, this is a great reason why you shouldn't iron on your board directly, because it warps it, and also it puts a lot of steam and water on there if you're using a steam iron, and it was a mistake, but this mat is already warped anyway. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't a big fan of the room that I was sewing in at the time either. There was something with the light in that room that messed with my eyes. I get migraines very easily, and if I looked at things too hard in that room, I started to get a migraine, and it didn't help with the sewing. Here you can see me sewing on the orange pieces. I just do the sides as a chain piece and cut and chain piece it again in a futile attempt to save a tiny amount of thread, but it's just the way I'm comfortable sewing. I do end up drawing those sides up so it's the same as the rest of the square, and then sew on the longer pieces again like I did for everything else. I'm also using the same cotton I used for the actual quilt, which is just this warm cream tone that goes really well with a lot of fabrics. It's a pretty universal shade to use if you don't have the exact colour, especially in quilting. Here I've just gotten all the pieces again and I'm ironing them out flat for the sides that I'm going to make. I wanted these pillows to be square with a probably 2 to 3 inches around the side that's also flat. I wanted to have piping on the edges and I brought supplies for that, but after procrastinating this project for over 6 months, I decided to just sew it instead of thinking about sewing it with the piping in a way that I've never done it before. This is my first quilt, this is my first pillow, I'm not too fussy. Here you can see me just drawing up these edges to make sure everything was pretty and where it should be. And then I just pretty much chain piece all these small pieces of fabric. I don't cut anything. I just try and put like sizes together. I did a lot of the words and ghosts together. Really looking back, I should have done like word orange, ghost orange, word orange, ghost orange or something like that. But I was just going in a random order. It doesn't bother me, I just think it would have been cool. I also didn't make sure everything was the same width. I kind of wanted it to show that they were just scraps that I was using of my cabbage. In my head that was a great idea and I still like it. Oh, everything's using a 1/4 inch foot. Whenever I quilt, I use a 1/4 inch foot. Most of the time in the sewing, it's hard for me to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance because I like 1/4 inch seam allowances. And here, once I've got the main ones down, I just continue to sew and sew and sew and try and make a big line of it. But this is the last sewing that I did on this pillow in that house. And this is June of 2019, by the way. And now we enter January of 2020 at my new house. Here I'm just sorting out the bag of scraps once again and ironing everything down on the ironing board that you can't see. Having this ironing board and a good cutting mat have saved my life, I swear, and my sewing machine's on its own table, it's great. Everything's being cut down to 3 inches, so it's 2.5 once it's sewn on. I quite like the size that it ended up being as well. Why did I go that size? Because I felt like it. Oh, and this is my larger ruler of the ruler that I've been using this whole video. I'll probably link it down below. To sew it on, I just put the right sides together and started sewing the strip on. I'm not always a big fan of pins for some reason, but when it came to the corners, I just took the strip and kind of put it to a 90-degree angle, like very much mitering the corners, and then just continued sewing around the quilt. I do have to go back after, and I ended up putting in an extra seam at the corner just to make them especially pointy and square. I didn't need to, I just wanted to. When it got to the last bit, I just sewed the two of them together and cut off the excess. Here you can see me going along all the edges and just doing that small seam. Here I'm just measuring on the first pillow how much I would need for the second pillow to make sure I had more than enough. And making sure they have the back pieces there. Frustratingly, this bit of orange was slightly too small, so I ended up piecing it together with the word fabric that you'll see later. I really did not want to cut into my other orange fabric just in case I need it for another project, and I still was real committed to using the scraps. It worked out well because I ended up having these words at the back so they're facing up. So where you can see on the actual pillow there where it says Happy Halloween, it all points in one direction. And if you look at the back of the pillow, the words are pointing in the same direction. So there is a definite top and bottom of the pillow. To me, I can tell you the top and bottom with the ghost too, but this is the top and the bottom of the pillow. Here I mess up and didn't sew something right. I cut out the bit where when I was sewing on the edges, I had a right and a wrong side together and then had to unpick that, and that was frustrating. When it came to sewing the back on, I pretty much just sewed along all the edges, making sure that the corners were together. I thought this would be harder, but it wasn't, so I'm really happy about that. The other thing I should have done is on the bottom piece of the sides, gone through and done a securing stitch, because I end up sewing 3 inches either side and leaving a couple of inches open in the middle to stuff the pillow. And on the first pillow where I didn't do any back stitching on the actual seams either, it created quite a mess. I did do those back stitchings on the second, but still doing a top stitch along the side fabric would have held those ribbon pieces together a lot better because I had to go back and secure them before I sewed the bottom closed. So here you can see me doing the back stitch for the bottom. And this is what it looks like when it's turned right way out. I'm just using a pack of pillows. I think they were 2 for $5 from Kmart or something, and using the insides to stuff them because it's cheaper than polyfill and also it's nice and comfy. If I had my way, I would have gone and brought another pack of pillows so that they could have an extra half pillow each because they weren't particularly over full and they will decompress over time, but for now they're fine. But I wasn't going to put this project off anymore. And I just sewed along the bottom with the sewing machine. I did try to sew it by hand, but it was ending up to be just finicky and a mess, and I really don't care. As I said, it's my first pillow for my first quilt. It can have some mistakes and obvious things. I could have put a zip in there or something, but more than likely I'll pull this apart again to put more stuffing in anyway. So this is what the pillows ended up looking like, and in a second there's going to be a picture of them with the actual quilt. I absolutely love the way they turned out and they're so comfy. Let me know if you guys like this or if you do something similar. Okay, have a good day. Bye!